Just a quick warning before we could begin this video. I am going to be talking about sex, quite frankly, and death postures. So if you are a bit squeamish and you don't like to hear about these topics, then rather don't watch this video. It's definitely not for you. Thanks. Once you've created your sigil, you're going to want to activate it or launch it, or whichever terminology you want to use. And just like it's said that if you ask 10 chaos magicians to explain chaos magic, you're going to end up with 11 different definitions. There are a lot of different ways you can actually launch your sigil. So I just want to go over some. There are some obvious ones, but you know, there's a lot of information out there about the obvious methods, but there are some methods that are a little less spoken about. Now, the objective here is to transfer the glyph from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind, which I've mentioned in previous videos. And the way to go about this is to enter into a trance state. And that trance state can be done in whichever method suits you. So it is really a case of experimenting with as many methods as you can actually think of, and as many methods as you can come across, to find the ones that actually work for you. And depending on the actual type of sigil or the type of work you're doing, or even just the mood you're in at the time, the method you use can differ. That's why if you can experiment with as many as you can and find the ones, the different methods that actually suit you and work for you, then at least you've got a nice little arsenal to work with. So some of the obvious ones would be things like spinning, whirling, dancing, drumming, clacking, chanting, singing. You know, there's a ton of different ways. There's also spontaneous singing, which I believe I've mentioned in previous videos. Spontaneous singing is really just once you get into a deep meditative state, then all you do is just start singing, just complete nonsense. Just let whatever sounds and words come out of your mouth, just let them come out. It's actually a brilliant way. I actually like using spontaneous singing to work with energy and just mold energy. It does help to sort of move the energy around, but it also brings you into a trance state. Now, the death posture, I have mentioned this in the past, but I've never actually described it, and there's a very good reason for that. If you do suffer from physical health issues, you definitely want to stay away from this. And if you suffer from mental health issues, don't even consider this. Just run away, as far away as you can. It's a very intensive method, and it does get very painful. But concerning mental health issues, it's really one of those methods that you just don't even want to try. It's you know, I can't say it enough. Just stay away. As simple as that. Just don't even try it. So I did do a bit of research just to refresh my memory on the actual method of the death posture, which then brought up a whole lot of other memories, because I did this several years back. And at the time I was also experimenting with the hangman position, and then I remembered the heron position, or the heron pose, which was actually used by the Celts to enter into a mantic state. So I'm going to be exploring the death postures a bit more, and I'll do a more in-depth video at a later date. But for now, just the normal default standard way of doing the death posture, which was described by Austin Osman Spare. He first wrote about it in his book, The Book of Pleasures. And you know, when you actually read what he wrote in there, it actually, as far as I can tell, there's actually 3 methods in there for you doing the death posture. And the one that everybody seems to pick is the second one. So I'm going to describe that one. This is a very painful method, but it's very effective. So all you do is you you stand, you clasp your hands together and put them behind your back, and your arms are rigid. And then the best thing to do is actually stand up against a wall, with your back against a wall, because what you're going to do is get on your tiptoes and also stretch up your head. And you stay in this position. So your body basically becomes completely and utterly tensed up. And it does start to cause a deficiency of air because your neck is stretched up, and also the strain on the rest of your body. So your breathing starts to become very laboured. And all you do is just stand in that position for as long as you possibly can. It's going to get, as I say, it's going to get extremely painful, and your air supply is going to decrease. So you're going to start probably feeling a lot of tingling in your body. But anyway, eventually what happens is you go into an altered state of mind, and eventually you're going to collapse on the floor. So when you collapse on the floor, just make sure you've got something soft to land on. But when you actually collapse on the floor, that stage there, when you actually enter into the altered state of mind, is where you would actually activate the sigil. And you can obviously use visualization for this. So you can actually use this for visualization techniques in general. It's not just for Sigil Magick, obviously. But when you collapse on the floor, you might feel a bit hysterical. This actually reminds me very much of, the mantic practices and the mantic states of the Celts and the bards, sitting on the fairy mound overnight to gain inspiration or Eowyn. And it was always said in the tales that sitting overnight, the bard either leaves inspired or goes completely and utterly insane. So this is why I say, if you've got mental health issues, don't even try this. And you could end up insane. It's a risk you're going to take if you're going to do something of this extreme. So I just wanted to get the death posture out of the way, because I keep speaking about it, never described it, never spoken about it, so there it is. Warnings and everything. Now, another method is the one that I like to use, which I'm going to link the video above. It's the video where I actually demonstrated Sigil Magick, so the creation of the sigil from the will sentence, how to break it down, create the sigil, and then activate it. And the activation method I used in there, which is one of the ones I actually like to use, very simple. You take a pencil or a ballpoint pen. Ballpoint pen is better because it makes a bit more of a noise. And then all you do is just circle the sigil. And you just keep circling, and what happens is you start picking up a rhythm. And the sound of the pen or the pencil on the paper, which is laying on a desk or some kind of surface, you have that sound. It goes and it just goes round and round, and you pick up the rhythm and you continue the rhythm. So you've got this rhythm which is very much like drumming itself, same type of concept. But what also happens is, as you go over the sigil, your hand blocks the sigil for a minute, and then it comes back, and it blocks it and comes back. So it's a method of actually flashing. And when I say flashing, I don't mean flashing your private parts. We're talking about the sigil actually flashing. So there's a few different methods of flashing. It's actually quite an extensive topic if you really go into it. But this method is one where you focus on the sound, and you gaze at the sigil as it's coming in and out of view. And that puts you into a trance state, and then it transfers the glyph into the subconscious, and then when you finish, you can just go, bring the circle into a spiral into the middle, and then that's it, done. That's a method that I can't remember. I did remember at some stage where I came up with that. It was another magical process that I read, and it just seemed like a brilliant way to actually use it on sigils. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's a good method to use. Then let's just have a brief look at flashing. As I say, there's a lot of different methods. I haven't really used flashing that much myself. But what you can do with the usual case of flashing is where you sit and you gaze at the sigil. Now, you might also want to look at Tratak or Trataka, which is a yogic method. What you do is you usually start off with a dot. You can use a candle, but it's usually mentioned to use a candle for this, but I wouldn't actually recommend that. The retinas can actually get burnt if you don't do it right. So I usually use a dot or some kind of symbol, but a dot is actually the best thing to use. So let's just go with a dot. So it's a little dot. It's not a dot like a ballpoint pen dot. It's a fair size, maybe a couple millimeters wide in diameter. And you put that on a piece of paper, put it on the wall so that it's eye level, and then you're about a meter and a half away from this dot. And then what you do is you stare at it without blinking for as long as you possibly can. And you keep doing this until you can gaze at it for like half an hour. The most I can do is 4 or 5 minutes. But you can use the same principle with your sigil. So what you would do, you would take your sigil and you'll just gaze at it. The reason I mentioned Tratak or Trataka is because you'll find that if you're gazing, what I find, if I'm gazing, I blink, and then as I blink, the image shifts slightly. But if you actually use this method of not blinking while you're actually gazing, then what happens, it becomes a lot easier. What happens is that the lines of the sigil start to move and start to shift. They may disappear, they may become more pronounced, and the background of the paper disappears. All these different types of things start to happen with a sigil. But it's that whole moving, it sort of becomes alive almost. And this is, I'm not sure why people call this flashing. As far as I know, people call this flashing, but anyway. So there is that method. What you can also do is use color. And what you do is if you transfer that image onto a blank piece of paper or a blank white wall or something. So what you do is you might use green. So you use green to create the sigil, the green color, and then you gaze at it for a while, and then you look at the blank paper or the blank wall, and you see the complementary color of what the sigil was. So it'll be red on the wall or the paper or whatever. So that's another method. You can use anything you want to. I mean, I've read of people using neon paint and then using strobe lights. Obviously, if you're going to use strobe lights, if you've got epilepsy, stay away from that one. There's this whole. I think the strobe lights and the neon paint and everything else is just. I'd love to actually do that. I haven't tried that yet, but I'd love to do that. So that's on the cards. But then there's another one. The obvious one is which some people just really want to know about, and some people just stay away from because I think they're a bit prudish. But that's using sex. Now this can be a very extensive topic because we could go into semen retention and everything else. But the basics are that if you are working as a couple or even a group, what you can do is actually paint the sigil on each other's body, and during orgasm you would then focus on the sigil. So obviously it needs to be on a part of the body where you're actually going to be looking at when you're reaching orgasm. My suggestion would be to just put it on all over the body, because unless you have a scripted sex life, you don't know what position you're going to end up in. So as I said, you would just paint it on the body, and then you would have sex, and during orgasm you focus on the sigil, and it then transfers, because at that point you move into a trance state. Now, it's very important. Using sex can be quite difficult because you often shift into that ecstatic state of the sex itself, the actual physical act, and the sigil just goes out the window. You don't really give a damn about it at that moment, but you need to completely become focused on the sigil itself and nothing else. So the actual sexual act just becomes a sexual act. But now there's a whole lot of other things we could look at here, especially solo practice if you masturbate, and especially if you're a man. There's a big difference when it comes to spirituality and sexuality between men and women, specifically with orgasm. For men, you actually release energy. Women don't. They actually retain their energy. And this is why semen retention from the yogic practices can become quite important. It's said that with an orgasm, a man loses 40% of their current chi. So if you are having an orgasm every night, or 10 times a day, or I don't know how many times you want to do it, you're going to be losing a lot of chi and releasing a lot of energy. But now, when it comes to sigil magic, either or can actually be quite useful. So depending on the processes you're using and what you're actually doing with the sigil, the release of energy and giving it to the working of the sigil can actually be quite helpful. In this case, some people say that the semen is what actually activates the sigil. I would tend to disagree. I think it's the actual energy given that is the thing that actually activates the sigil. Now, from a woman's point of view, as I say, you're not releasing the energy. However, you are building up energy, and you can mentally release that. With the men, it's more of a physical release. With women, it can become more of a mental release. So either way, women, men can use the release of the energy of the orgasm to activate the sigil. But it just, in my mind, in my view, in my perspective, it just gets released slightly differently. But you can, as I say, you can also have a look into semen retention, which then you can still have the orgasm, but you retain the energy. And I mean, there's a whole load of avenues you can go down with. So, sex and sigils and magic, huge topic, and some people don't actually like talking about it. Okay, so as I said, there are a lot of different ways you can activate a sigil, and you can get really creative. In fact, it's encouraged that you get creative. Don't just follow what everybody else does. Austin Osman Spare himself said that everybody needs to create their own method. But there's only so many things you can actually come up with, and there are lots and lots of chaos magicians around now. So I suppose it would reach a point where you can't really come up with any new methods. But what you can do is take old methods and adapt them, put different methods together and use them in that way. So it's all about experimentation. And as I say, finding those methods that work for you, that you are comfortable with and you're happy with. But go exploring and read as much material as you can get your hands on from all different chaos magicians who are practicing sigil magic, and find out what their methods are. Gordon White speaks about simply just during meditation gazing at the sigil, and it has kind of a bit of a magical feel to it. And then once it actually loses that quality and just becomes a normal piece of paper with a drawing on it, that's when he knows that it's been transferred into his subconscious. So there are really any number of ways you can actually activate a sigil, and a number of ways you can go about creating a sigil. So it is chaos magic, and as I said, you need to find your own method. So that's it for today. On Friday, I'm going to actually speak a bit about what to do with the sigil after it's been activated, because there's a lot of uncertainty about what you do with it, and the issue of lusting after results. Do you get rid of it? How do you forget about it? And all those things. So I'll speak about that on Friday. And that's it. Have a good one. Cheers.